Why World War I soldiers slept standing up. The guns fell silent for a moment. Mud clung to boots and the stench of shellfire lingered in the air. Private Thomas huddled against the trench wall, exhausted. Though his body screamed for rest, he refused to listen. And then, he began to drift off, while still standing. Strange as it sounds, many soldiers in the Great War reported the same thing. They would doze, even sleep, while upright. In this episode, we're going to step into the trenches, into the minds of these men, to uncover why they sometimes slept on their feet, and what that reveals about the horror and resilience of life at the front line. This is not a myth. It's a symptom of a world pushed beyond its limits. Life in the trenches. The First World War redefined warfare. As the lines froze and movement stalled, armies dug in, creating trenches that stretched for miles across France, Belgium, and beyond. Yet those trenches were not a sanctuary. They were open wounds in the earth, places of mud, blood, cold, and constant danger. Although these brave men rotated through stints on the front line, rest was almost impossible. During daylight, there were moments when troops would love to catch fragments of sleep in dugouts or shallow recesses. Still, the shelling never stopped. Snipers, rats, lice, floods, and fatigue constantly assaulted their bodies and minds together. As one veteran later recalled, "You sleep by sitting on the fire step, trying to hide under your overcoat." But it was a very, very broken sleep. Under such extreme pressure, sometimes a soldier's only option was to keep going, even while collapsing into sleep. Evidence and accounts of sleep while standing. So, did soldiers really sleep while standing? The short answer is yes, though it happened rarely, only for brief moments, and only when exhaustion reached its breaking point. Historical records and wartime letters describe how men, pushed beyond human limits, sometimes drifted into sleep without even realizing it. One diary tells of a soldier collapsing during a night watch. Others mention men who nodded off while leaning against sandbags, rifles still in hand. Even modern reconstructions of trench life, like those by Mercator's, confirm this reality. Some troops were so exhausted that they would find themselves sleeping whilst standing up, or falling into a slumber while having their injuries dressed. This was not common, but when it did happen, it was a clear sign of what constant warfare did to the human body and mind. A kind of cumulative exhaustion that stripped away all strength and sense of safety. In a world that refused to let the body heal, even sleep while standing became a desperate act of survival. Why did this happen? The physiology of fatigue and war's demands. Let's unpack why this happened. What pushed bodies to that breaking point? Sleep deprivation and war rhythms. Soldiers were rarely granted a full night's rest. Many were woken every few hours for Stand 2 patrols, danger watches, or sudden barrage alerts. With the mind and body starved of uninterrupted rest, something strange begins to happen. The brain starts to drift on its own. These are called microsleeps, brief moments of sleep that can occur even while standing, walking, or holding a rifle. In the trenches, those fleeting seconds of unconsciousness could mean the difference between life and death. The turnover of guard duty. Every unit had to rotate duties around the clock. One man might stand sentry while others rested, and then take their place a few hours later. But exhaustion doesn't respect schedules. Some soldiers, meant to be alert and guarding, found themselves nodding off on their feet. They didn't collapse. Instead, their bodies would sag slightly, muscles trembling, eyes fluttering, fighting to stay upright. Eyewitnesses recalled comrades gently nudging each other awake, or quietly stepping in to take over a shift when fatigue became too much to bear. Adaptive behavior. Survival through exhaustion. Eventually, the human body found its own way to cope. In moments of unbearable fatigue, soldiers learned to steal rest wherever they could. They leaned against trench walls. They slumped forward on their rifles. They rested their heads on folded arms or elbows, half sleeping, half listening for danger. It wasn't real sleep. It was a strange, liminal state between wakefulness and collapse. A survival mechanism born from desperation. To truly understand what this kind of exhaustion looked like, here are two short scenes, drawn from real and compiled accounts of trench life. Corporal Ellis had been at the front for days without proper rest. He had watched comrades fall beside him, heard shells splitting the air, and smelled the decay that lingered across no man's land. On one quiet stretch of the trench, fatigue finally overcame him. He leaned forward, boots buried in the mud, hands hanging loosely by his sides, and for a brief moment, the world vanished. His body swayed, lost between sleep and waking. A nearby comrade noticed and touched his shoulder. Ellis jolted upright, eyes blinking, breath sharp. "I must hold," he whispered. And somehow he did. The night watcher, a young British private, stood guard at a midnight listening post. The night was unnervingly still. No gunfire, no sound but his own breathing. Leaning against a wall of sandbags, he felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down. Slowly, his head drooped. For an instant, he gave in, drifting into darkness. Then, startled, he caught himself just before falling. His heart raced. Later, he confessed he couldn't tell how long he had been dozing, only that it felt like the night itself had pulled him under. These moments were rare, but they capture the essence of life in the trenches. A battle not only against the enemy, but against the human body's desperate need for rest. Conclusion and reflection. Sleeping while standing wasn't just a strange wartime rumor. It was a real glimpse into the brutal limits of human endurance. It speaks of men so drained that their bodies simply shut down, yet their spirit refused to break. It reminds us that war is not only about heroic victories or grand strategies. It's also about the silent struggles. Soldiers stumbling through the dark, desperate for a moment's peace, fighting not only the enemy before them, but also the exhaustion that threatened to consume them. If you take away one message from this story, let it be this. In the mud, in the cold, under the relentless thunder of shells, even a few seconds of rest became an act of survival. Thank you for stepping into the trenches with me today. If you'd like to hear more untold stories from the world wars, from forgotten diaries to hidden letters, subscribe, and let's keep walking together through the echoes of history.